My name is Michael Crawford, and I am 65 years old. I've spent the better part of my life building something I can be proud of. After 35 years as an engineer, I retired 5 years ago, hoping to finally slow down and enjoy the quieter side of life. My home is modest, but it's mine. I've always been someone who takes pride in the work I do, and now that I've retired, it feels like I've earned the right to take a step back. But retirement hasn't been as peaceful as I imagined. It's been filled with moments of reflection, but also a creeping sense of unease that has been hard to shake off. I've worked hard for what I have, built it with my own hands, and I had always hoped that my daughter Julia would one day appreciate that. Julia, she's 33 now, was always the bright one. From a young age, she showed promise, her mind quick and her charm undeniable. She had always been the kind of person who could talk her way into anything, and I had believed in her potential, always tried to support her. But lately, there's been something off about her. It started small, the little things, a new car, a trip abroad, a phone call asking for a little extra money to cover a surprise expense. I never questioned it at first. She was my daughter, and I always thought she had a good head on her shoulders. But as the requests became more frequent and the amounts grew larger, I began to wonder, what was really going on? It was when I received the first strange notification from my bank that the reality began to sink in. A withdrawal of several $1,000s from an account I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but when I checked my records, I realized the money had been transferred to a new account in my name. My name. The anger started to bubble beneath the surface, but I pushed it aside. This had to be a mistake, didn't it? So, I did what I always do. I remained calm and methodical. I contacted the bank, reviewed all my recent transactions, and to my horror, discovered that it wasn't just one mistake. It was a series of unauthorized transfers, loans, and credit card applications, all taken out under my name. I felt the weight of it hit me all at once. My daughter, my only child, had been using me. She had been using my name and my good credit to fund her lifestyle. She'd been living beyond her means, covering debts she had no intention of paying, and I had been none the wiser. The realization struck me like a blow to the gut. I felt betrayed, not just because of the money, but because my daughter, someone I had always trusted, had used me as a stepping stone to cover her own failures. For days, I couldn't think straight. The house felt different. The quiet I had once enjoyed was now filled with the echo of my own thoughts. How could she do this to me? I'd always given her the benefit of the doubt, always believed she was making the best decisions. I had been a good father, hadn't I? I had provided, supported, guided her through life, and this is what I got in return: a betrayal so deep that it cut to the very core of everything I thought we had. I tried to ignore the growing anger, tried to focus on something else, but I couldn't. The truth was too painful, too real. It wasn't just the money, it was the manipulation, the lies. I had spent my life working hard, saving every penny, and now I found myself in a situation where I didn't know if I could trust the one person I thought I could count on. Julia had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure how to deal with it. But I knew one thing: I couldn't let this go on. I couldn't let her continue to take advantage of me. So I started to plan. I would confront her. I would make her face what she had done. But I had to be careful. I had to be smart. I had spent my career making decisions based on logic and reason, and this situation wouldn't be any different. I would not be swayed by emotions, no matter how much I hurt. I had to protect myself, my home, my hard-earned assets. I couldn't let her destroy everything I had worked for. As I sat in my study, looking over the financial records, my mind raced. What was my next move? How could I protect myself from the daughter I had always trusted? The feeling of betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was about the trust that had been broken, and I wasn't sure how to fix it, if I ever could. But I knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning, and the moment I confronted Julia, everything would change. The silence in my home office was almost suffocating as I sat at my desk, the dim light from the lamp casting long shadows on the walls. The papers in front of me seemed to blur together as I sifted through old documents, but my mind wasn't on the task at hand. For the past few days, I had felt an unease in my gut that I couldn't shake. The calls from the bank, the strange charges on my accounts, something wasn't right. But I had tried to push it all aside, to tell myself that it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. But today, something told me I couldn't ignore it any longer. I opened the first bank statement, then the next, my heart sinking lower with every page I turned. The numbers were foreign to me. Large sums, transferred to places I didn't recognize. Payments for things I never purchased. As I went deeper, I found more. Loans, credit card bills, and transactions I didn't even remember authorizing. My hands shook as I read through the list, unable to believe what I was seeing. My mind screamed for an explanation, but there was only one conclusion. My daughter, Julia, had been using my name to take out loans and make purchases without my consent. The weight of the discovery hit me like a physical blow, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. I had spent my life building a stable, secure future for my family, and now, here it was. My own daughter had been using me, exploiting my trust and my resources. How could she do this to me? I had always believed the best in her, always tried to help her when she needed it. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the papers in front of me, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? How many times had I unknowingly covered for her, believing her stories of financial struggles? I had always tried to be a good father, always tried to provide for her. But had I been too generous? Had I given her too much, enabling her to live beyond her means, to rely on me for everything? The anger began to swell within me, but it was mixed with something else. Hurt, betrayal, a deep sense of loss. My daughter had used me. She had manipulated me, and I hadn't even seen it. How had I been so blind? The more I thought about it, the more the questions piled up. Did she even care about what she was doing? Did she understand the damage she had caused, not just to my finances, but to the trust that had been between us? I had given her everything I could, always trying to help her get ahead, but now I realized that I had been nothing more than a stepping stone for her to climb higher. The worst part was that I had allowed it. I had let my love for her blind me to the truth. I had let her take advantage of my kindness, my desire to see her succeed. But no more. The decision was made. I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't let her destroy what I had worked so hard for. She needed to understand the consequences of her actions. And I needed to make sure that she could never do this again. As I sat there, the weight of the situation pressing down on me, I realized that this wasn't just about money. This was about trust, respect, and the delicate balance between a father's love and the need for boundaries. I had failed to set those boundaries, and now I had to correct it. My hands were still trembling as I picked up the phone, my heart racing as I dialed her number. I knew this conversation would change everything, but it had to happen. The truth had to come out. Julia had to face what she had done. I waited as the phone rang, the sound filling the room as I steeled myself for what was to come. "Hello?" Her voice answered, soft and casual, like everything was fine. It took everything I had not to let my anger slip through. "Julia," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "We need to talk." The house felt unusually still as I sat in the living room, my gaze fixed on the door. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable moment that would change everything. The papers were still on the table, the evidence of betrayal and deceit lying in plain sight. The truth was undeniable, and now I had to confront her. Julia was on her way. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced at the clock. She would be here soon. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times, but no amount of preparation could ease the tension that was settling in my bones. As a father, you always hope for the best for your children. You want them to succeed, to make the right choices. But when you realize they've used you, manipulated you for their own gain, it's a blow that cuts deeper than anything else. When the door finally opened and Julia stepped inside, I felt the weight of the moment wash over me. She looked the same, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her eyes sparkling with that familiar, confident look. But today, there was something different. The air between us felt charged, like electricity waiting to ignite. She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice light, as if nothing was wrong. "What's going on?" I didn't answer her immediately. I didn't need to. She could feel it too. I stood up from the couch, my hands shaking slightly, but I kept my voice steady as I spoke. "Sit down, Julia. We need to talk." She hesitated for a moment, sensing the change in my tone, but eventually sat down across from me, a nervous tension radiating from her. I didn't waste any time. I slid the papers across the table to her, watching as her eyes scanned the documents, the loans, the credit card bills, the purchases, all taken out in my name. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at the papers in shock, as if the reality of what she had done had finally caught up with her. "Julia," I said, my voice low but firm. "This is what I've been seeing in my accounts. You've been using my name to take out loans. You've been making purchases without my knowledge, without my permission. How could you do this?" She looked up at me then, her face flushing with what I could only describe as a mix of guilt and anger. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words came out in a rush, defensive and quick. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, her voice trembling with frustration. "I didn't think it would be such a big deal. I just needed to keep up. You don't understand, Dad. You don't know what it's like." I could feel the anger rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Don't lie to me, Julia. You've been using me, using my name and my credit to cover your own debts. I trusted you, and this is how you repay me." She looked away, her gaze shifting to the floor, but I could see the guilt in her eyes now. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Dad. I didn't. I just—" She faltered, trying to find the right words, but they didn't come. Instead, she launched into an explanation that felt more like an excuse. "I've been struggling, okay? You don't know how hard it's been. I've been working non-stop, and I couldn't keep up with everything. The bills, the rent, the expenses. It was too much. I just needed the extra money to survive." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly, the hurt and anger bubbling to the surface. "You think I don't know what it's like to struggle?" I said, my voice rising now, filled with frustration. "I've worked my entire life to make sure you had everything you needed, Julia. And this is how you repay me? By lying to me, by using me to cover up your own failures?" Her face flushed, and she stood up, her voice trembling with anger now. "You don't understand, Dad," she shouted. "You've always had everything. You've never had to worry about money, and you've never had to deal with the pressure I've had. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for everything to go wrong. I just wanted to have a life like everyone else. But no, you've always controlled everything. You've always been there, telling me what to do, what not to do." I stood up as well, my anger reaching its peak. "You want to talk about control, Julia? This is the result of your choices. This isn't about me controlling you. This is about you not being able to face the consequences of your actions." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. "I didn't know what else to do, Dad. I didn't know how to fix it. I thought if I kept going, kept pretending everything was okay, I'd get through it. I didn't think you'd find out. I didn't think you'd care." The words cut through me like a knife. The hurt in her voice was real, but so was the manipulation behind it. I had been too blind to see it before, but now it was crystal clear. She wasn't just struggling. She was hiding her mistakes, hiding the life she had been living, pretending she was something she wasn't. And in doing so, she had used me to cover her tracks. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I can't help you anymore, Julia," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "I've been enabling you, and I won't do it anymore. You need to learn to stand on your own. You need to face the consequences of your actions. I can't protect you from this." Her face twisted in disbelief. "You're just going to leave me to deal with this on my own, after everything I've been through?" "You've had your chance, Julia," I said, my voice firm now, resolute. "I've given you everything I can, but you've been taking advantage of me. I won't let you do it anymore." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. We stood there in silence for a long time, neither of us sure what to say next. I had made my decision, and now I had to live with the consequences. So did she. The days after the confrontation felt like a heavy fog that refused to lift. The silence in the house was deafening, and it was as though everything around me had changed. Julia was gone, but the weight of what had happened lingered in every corner of the house. The familiar places, the kitchen, the living room, felt foreign now, as though something had been irrevocably broken. I didn't want to admit it, but the loneliness of the house had settled into my bones. It wasn't just about losing Julia's presence in the house. It was the guilt, the nagging feeling that I had made the wrong choice. I had done what I thought was right, but now, as the days dragged on, I questioned whether I had been too harsh, too quick to act without fully understanding the consequences. Julia's absence wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and it cut deeper than I had imagined. I hadn't expected her to simply accept my decision. I knew she would be angry, but I hadn't anticipated how desperate she would become. The first few days after I cut her off were relatively calm, but soon the phone calls started. At first, they were infrequent, just a few messages asking to talk. I ignored them, but soon the calls became more persistent, more desperate. She was pleading, her voice filled with anxiety and fear. "Dad, please, I can't do this without you," she said one night, her voice cracking. "You have to help me. I don't know how to make it without your support. I'm drowning." I stood in the living room, staring at my phone, conflicted. A part of me wanted to pick up the phone, to hear her voice again, to tell her that everything would be all right. But I knew that if I did that, I would be enabling her again. I couldn't go back. I couldn't undo the decision I had made. So I let it ring. Let her voice, full of fear and desperation, echo in my mind. The days passed, and Julia's behavior became more erratic. She would show up at the house, knocking on the door at all hours, demanding to speak with me. "Dad, please," she would say, her voice strained and shaky. "I can't survive without your help. I'll do anything. Just give me some time to pay you back." It was heartbreaking to see her like this, to hear the desperation in her voice, but it wasn't the same daughter I had raised, the one who had once been so capable, so independent. This was someone who had lost control, someone who had been living a lie for far too long. She had to face the consequences of her actions, and I had to make sure she did. The pressure mounted, the guilt weighing on me with each passing day. But I knew there was no other choice. I couldn't let her continue to manipulate me. I had to protect myself, my assets, my peace of mind. I hired a lawyer, the same one who had helped me with various legal matters over the years. I explained everything to him, from the loans to the credit cards, the transfers that had been made without my knowledge or consent. He advised me to take legal action to freeze Julia's access to my finances and ensure that she could no longer take advantage of me. It was the only way to protect myself, he said. So, I made the call. I contacted the banks, alerted them to the situation, and froze my accounts. No more loans in my name. No more charges I hadn't authorized. I knew it was going to make things worse, but I also knew it was the only way to stop the bleeding. When I called Julia to let her know what I had done, the anger in her voice was immediate. "How could you do this to me, Dad?" she screamed. "You can't just cut me off and leave me to rot. I'm your daughter. You're supposed to help me, not abandon me." Her words hit me like a slap in the face, but I couldn't back down now. I had to be strong. "I'm not abandoning you, Julia," I said calmly, though my voice was tight with emotion. "But I won't continue to enable your behavior. You have to face the consequences of what you've done. You have to learn to live with the choices you've made." There was silence on the other end of the line, and then I heard her sob. It wasn't the anger or resentment I had expected. It was raw, genuine pain. "I don't know what to do, Dad. I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. The guilt gnawed at me, but I couldn't let it cloud my judgment. "You'll figure it out, Julia. You're stronger than you think. But you have to do it on your own." I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of what I had just said. I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. Was I being too harsh? But the answer was clear in my mind. I had to let her go. It wasn't about abandoning her. It was about teaching her a lesson she would never forget. The next few weeks were filled with more tension, more calls and messages from Julia, each one more desperate than the last. The family began to divide. Some relatives, including my sister, questioned my decision. They said I was too hard on her, that I should have given her more time, more chances. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep giving in. I couldn't keep making excuses for her. Julia needed to learn to stand on her own, and that meant taking responsibility for the mistakes she had made. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, for both of us, but I had no choice. I had made my decision. Now, she had to face the consequences, and so did I. The fallout was just beginning, and it was going to be harder than I could have imagined. The days stretched into weeks, and the weight of my decision continued to press on my chest. It wasn't just the silence in the house that was difficult to bear. It was the guilt, the constant questioning of whether I had done the right thing. But as I sat in my study, the place where I had spent so many years making decisions, I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I had done what I needed to do. The thought was difficult to hold on to, as if the very act of acknowledging it would make the reality too real to face. My hand hovered over the papers on my desk, the financial records that had started this whole mess, the documents that still felt like an accusation. My heart still ached when I thought of Julia, her face twisted in anger and confusion when I told her I was cutting her off. She had tried to manipulate me, tried to make me feel guilty, but I couldn't let that sway me. She needed to learn. She needed to see that the world didn't owe her anything. I had always tried to teach her that, but somehow I had failed. Now I had no choice but to step back and let her face the consequences. I heard from Julia less frequently now. The phone calls had become less desperate, more resigned. She still asked for money, of course. What else could she do? But the tone had shifted. It wasn't anger anymore. It was a quiet desperation, as if she had finally begun to grasp the weight of what had happened. The last time she called, there was no pleading, no guilt tripping, just a simple strain. "I can't do this alone, Dad. I need help." I hadn't responded. What could I say? I had already given her everything I could, and now she had to do the rest on her own. I knew this was her journey now. She had to learn the hard lessons of life, the ones I had hoped she would learn without the harshness of reality forcing it on her. But watching her struggle was the hardest part. Every day I fought with the guilt. Was I being too harsh? Was this really what was best for her? I wanted to believe it was. I had to. But the price of my decision weighed heavily on me. I knew she was hurting. I knew she was struggling to make ends meet, to survive without the cushion I had always provided. But I also knew that if I gave in now, if I helped her, I would be enabling the very behavior that had led us here. Julia was facing the consequences of her own choices, and it was time she learned to stand on her own. I had taught her the value of hard work, of responsibility. Now, I had to trust that she would figure it out. In the quiet moments, when I was alone in my study, I thought about her often. I wondered if she would change, if she would learn the lessons I had failed to teach her. I hoped she would. But as much as I wanted to shield her from the pain, I knew I couldn't. This was her fight, and she had to fight it herself. I had done all I could. The legal steps I had taken, freezing her access to my finances, cutting her off completely, had been necessary. But they were also freeing. As much as I had wanted to help her, I had been trapped in a cycle of enabling her. Now, with that weight lifted from my shoulders, I could finally breathe again. I had taken control of my finances, of my life, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The turmoil I had felt when I made the decision was slowly fading, replaced by a quiet confidence that I had done what was necessary. Julia had been angry, but I knew that anger would eventually turn to understanding. She had to see that the world wouldn't hand her anything. She had to learn that life didn't owe her a thing. I had taught her that much, even if she hadn't understood it before. As for me, I felt a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt in years. I had made a decision, a hard decision, and I had stuck to it. I had taken control of my own life again, and that was something I hadn't realized I needed until now. I wasn't sure what the future held for Julia or for our relationship, but I knew one thing: I had done the right thing, and that was enough. I sat back in my chair, staring at the papers on my desk. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. And as I sat there, alone in the stillness of my home, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had reclaimed my life.